Hello, and thanks for being here again today. Today I'm speaking about the god Baal, sometimes in Christian writings known as Baal, leaving out the original apostrophe. Baal was a title that meant lord or owner or husband in Northwest Semitic languages during ancient times. Knowledge of Baal's personality and functions come to us through the discovery of a number of tablets beginning in 1929 in a place called Ugarit, or sometimes pronounced Ugarit, in Syria, northern Syria, dating to the 2nd millennium BCE. Now, the tablets are closely associated with worship of Baal at the temple there in Ugarit, but they also probably are giving us information about the broader, more general Canaanite worship of the god. The Ugarit texts tell of many fertility aspects of Baal, such as his relations with Anath, his sister and consort, and also the siring of a divine bull from a heifer. And all this is part of his fertility role, which, when it's fulfilled, means an abundance of crops and healthy herds of animals, and also human fertility. Now, Baal was not exclusively a fertility god. He was also the king of the gods. And in order to achieve that, he had to seize the divine kingship of Yam, the sea god. Now, the myths about Baal also tell of his struggle to obtain a palace, one as grand as the other gods. So Baal persuaded Asherah to intercede with her husband El, the head of the pantheon, to have an palace constructed for him. And this did happen. The god of arts and crafts, Kothar, oversees the erection of an amazing palace, one that actually covered over 10,000 acres. The myth of this particular palace may actually refer in part to the building of the temple to Baal in Ugarit. Near Baal's temple, there's also the temple of Dagon. And the tablets say that Dagon is Baal's father. The worship of Baal was popular in Egypt as well, from about 1400 before the Common Era to around 1075. Through the influence of the Arameans, who borrowed the Babylonian pronunciation of Baal, the god was ultimately known as the Greek god Belos, often called Zeus. Baal was worshipped many times as a local deity. The Hebrew scriptures frequently speak of Baal in a given place, such as the Baal of Lebanon or the Baal of Ugarit, but also uses the term Baalim in the plural to show that perhaps in many places this god was worshipped. Now, in the formative stages of Israel's history, that term Baal, that name, didn't necessarily mean apostasy or something evil. The judge Gideon, one of the judges of the Hebrew people, was also named Jerubbaal, and King Saul had a son, Ishbaal, Ishbaal. For these early Hebrews, the term Baal just designated Lord of the Israelites, as it did Lord of Lebanon or Lord of Ugarit. What made this name Baal an anathema to Hebrew religion was in the 9th century BC, when Jezebel introduced her Phoenician form of Baalism wanted that worship instead of the Israelite God Yahweh. And by the time of Hosea in the mid-8th century, the antagonism was so strong that very often the term Baal was replaced with the term Boshet, which means shame. More about that in just a minute. By the 3rd millennium BCE, Baal was also used as the proper name for a god and not just a title. And this name was usually associated with the storm and fertility god Hadad. Now, Baal appears in the Jewish scriptures 90 times in reference to various gods. The priests of the Canaanite Baal are mentioned a number of times, the Canaanites being the enemies of the Hebrew people, prominently in the book of 1 Kings. And many scholars believe that this describes Jezebel's attempt to infiltrate the worship of Yahweh with her worship of Baal of Tyre and Baal Shaman, the Lord of the heavens, one or the other of those two representations of Baal. And 1 Kings chapter 18 records a confrontation between the priests of Baal and Elijah, the priest of the prophet of Yahweh. And both sides offer a sacrifice to their god. And the challenge is that the god will send fire down from heaven to burn the sacrifice. And the priests of the Baal are unsuccessful, and Elijah's god Yahweh is successful in burning up the altar and everything on it, even though it had been covered with water. And so this, for the Israelite people, set the God Yahweh as far superior to the god of Jezebel. And Elijah ordered that those priests would be destroyed. Other references to the priests of Baal show them burning incense to their god or making sacrifices to the god, wearing special vestments. So it was this program of Jezebel in the 9th century BC to introduce into Israel's capital city, Samaria, her Phoenician worship of Baal, as opposed to the worship of Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, that made this name of Baal an anathema. And it was at this time that the Hebrew people even began to change their names. Names like Jerubbaal were changed to Jerubosheth, and the name Eshbaal became Ishboseth, and Meribbaal became Mephibosheth. And those were changing the name from Baal, the Lord, to Shem. The scholar Briette Kelly refers us to Hosea chapter 2, where are mentioned some cultic sexual practices of the worship of Baal. It's believed that this is a reference to a time when the Israelite people were either forsaking their God for the Baals or were combining the two religions. And that Hosea's reference to sexual acts are actually a metaphor for Israelites' apostasy. Now, a name we haven't come across before, Baal Zebub, two words, fly lord, occurs in the first chapter of the second book of Kings, and it's the name of the Philistine god Ekron. And in this account, Ahaziah, the king of Israel, has consulted the priests of Baal Zebub as to whether he would survive injuries that had occurred when he took a fall. And the prophet Elijah was so upset by this inquiry that he prophesied that the king would die quickly, and he actually called down rain from heaven to destroy the soldiers who had been involved in this encounter. So since then, we have heard this term Beelzebub as referring to in the New Testament to Satan, prince or king of the demons, either Beelzebub or Beelzebul. Now, much closer to our time, in the 1600s, I believe it was 1667, John Milton wrote Paradise Lost. And in it, he describes fallen angels who are collecting around Satan, stating that their heavenly names have been blotted out and erased, and they would acquire new names as they wandered on the earth as false gods. And these new names were Baalim and Ashtaroth. And they were given as the collective names of the male and female demons or false gods, respectively. Well, Baal worship has had a long and varied history among Canaanites, Egyptians, Phoenicians, and even the Israelites, the Jews, especially those of the northern kingdom. Sometimes the Baals were worshipped as local gods to ensure good weather for crops, and at other times as supreme deities comparable to El or Yahweh. And studies continue today into the interesting cult of the Baalim as scholars attempt to continue to interpret the archaeology and the writings of ancient peoples. So if you're interested in learning about these various religions and spiritual movements, I hope you'll join with me again next week. As always, I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate your support. Stay well and stay safe this week. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.